The bridge lights dimmed as the Resolute shifted into combat mode. Every display glowed crimson across Admiral Lyra Vane's face, while officers scrambled between tactical stations. Outside the massive front viewport, 3 dark destroyers drifted silently against the stars. No signals, no warning broadcasts, just cold black hulls moving with unnatural precision. Distance? Lyra asked. 4,000 miles and closing fast, the navigation officer replied. No faction markings detected. Ethan Hayes stood near the rear maintenance console with his toolbox still in one hand. Calm. Completely calm. That bothered Lyra more than the approaching fleet. Most civilians panicked during first contact situations. Even experienced crew members showed fear in their eyes when warships appeared out of nowhere. Ethan only studied the tactical screen like he had seen this exact scenario before. You said it is a trap, Lyra said sharply. Explain. Ethan glanced toward the destroyers. Those ships are too clean. One officer frowned. What does that even mean? Ethan stepped closer to the holographic display and pointed toward the enemy formation. Pirates rush targets. They scatter movement patterns to look unpredictable. These ships are maintaining military spacing within 0.5% accuracy. The bridge fell quiet. Lyra crossed her arms. Meaning somebody wants you to think they are pirates. At that exact moment, the destroyers accelerated. Fast. Too fast. Warning alarms erupted across the bridge as new signatures appeared behind the Resolute. Another 6 ships emerged from hyperspace directly into their rear flank. Ambush confirmed, shouted Tactical Command. They are cutting off retreat vectors. Panic spread instantly. Officers shouted over each other while targeting systems struggled to lock onto the incoming vessels. Lyra felt the familiar pressure settle across her shoulders. Responsibility. Thousands of lives depending on one decision. Then Ethan spoke again. Quietly. Do not fire. Half the bridge turned toward him in disbelief. Excuse me. Lyra asked coldly. Ethan pointed toward the nearest enemy ship. Their front cannons are cold. What? No. Heat buildup. No active charge cycle. They are not preparing to attack. Tactical officers quickly scanned the readings. One of them looked up with confusion. He is right. Ethan set his toolbox down slowly. They are hurting us. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Into what? Ethan looked toward the star map. Toward the dead zone near the edge of the sector. His jaw tightened slightly for the first time. A gravity well. Silence swallowed the bridge. Every officer there understood what that meant. A disabled flagship trapped inside unstable gravity currents became blind. Defenseless. Easy to board. Lyra stepped toward him. How could you possibly know that? Ethan did not answer immediately. The tactical screen reflected across his tired eyes as another enemy vessel shifted position exactly where he predicted. Like pieces moving across a board he already understood. Because, he said softly, this is not piracy. The nearest officer swallowed hard. Then who are they? Ethan stared at the enemy formation for one long second before speaking. Professional hunters. The room temperature suddenly felt colder. Outside the viewport, the destroyers adjusted formation again. Perfectly synchronized. Like predators tightening a net. Then every communication channel aboard the Resolute activated at once. Static flooded the bridge speakers before a mechanical voice echoed through the ship. Attention, Resolute. Surrender the human mechanic known as Ethan Hayes, and your crew will be spared unnecessary losses. Every head on the bridge turned toward him instantly. Ethan closed his eyes briefly like a man hearing an old nightmare return. Admiral Lyra Vane stared at him in silence. Then the tactical officer's voice broke through the frozen room. Admiral, his face had gone pale. 7 Imperial bounty networks just updated simultaneously. Lyra looked at the screen. One name appeared across every monitor on the bridge. Ethan Hayes. Wanted. The bounty number kept climbing so fast the system struggled to calculate it. The bridge stayed silent for 3 full seconds after the bounty appeared. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed loudly. The only sound came from the soft mechanical hum of the Resolute drifting through dark space while enemy ships tightened their formation outside the viewport. Admiral Lyra Vane kept staring at the tactical display. 12 billion credits. Then 13. The number continued climbing as more Imperial networks synchronized into the contract. She had seen planetary governors with smaller bounties than this. One of the younger officers swallowed hard beside her station. That is impossible, he whispered. No mechanic is worth that much. Ethan Hayes said nothing. He simply stood near the rear console with his hands resting against the edge of the maintenance table like a man waiting for terrible weather to arrive. The bridge lights painted sharp shadows across his face. Lyra noticed something then. Nobody aboard the ship had ever seen him afraid. Tired, yes. Quiet always. But never afraid. Until now. It was subtle. A slight tension near his jaw. The kind soldiers carried when old memories started breathing again. The communication channel activated once more. Attention resolute. The mechanical voice repeated. Failure to comply will result in boarding authorization. One tactical officer slammed his hand against the console. Boarding authorization from who? The answer came instantly. 7 Imperial insignias appeared across the main screen together. The room turned cold. Empires did not cooperate. Not unless the threat terrified them all equally. Lyra slowly turned toward Ethan. You have 10 seconds to explain why 7 governments are hunting a ship mechanic. Ethan rubbed a grease stain across his knuckles before answering. Because they are scared. Of you. Of what I know. Before Lyra could press further, proximity alarms flared across the bridge. Enemy ships were repositioning again. Smooth. Controlled. Predatory. One destroyer moved directly beneath the Resolute, while another cut across their escape lane. Ethan stepped forward immediately. They are forcing your ship into dead drift. Can we break through? Lyra asked. Not if you keep using standard fleet patterns. He reached toward the tactical console before stopping himself halfway, like a man remembering he was no longer allowed to touch. Command systems. Lyra noticed the hesitation. Do it, she ordered. Ethan's fingers moved across the holographic controls with impossible speed. Entire attack vectors shifted. Engine output rerouted. Navigation markers recalculated in seconds. Crew members stared openly now. This was not mechanic work. This was command-level combat prediction. Ethan highlighted a narrow opening between 2 enemy destroyers. Full reverse thrust for exactly 4 seconds, he said calmly. Then rotate 20 degrees portside and cut all external lights. One officer frowned. That maneuver makes no tactical sense. Ethan did not even look at him. Neither does surviving. Lyra held his gaze for one long moment before giving the order. Do it. The Resolute surged backward violently. Warning sirens echoed through the ship as massive engines roared against the darkness. Then the flagship rotated sharply and vanished into silence as every external light shut off at once. Outside the viewport, the enemy formation hesitated. Just slightly, but enough. Ethan counted softly under his breath. 3, 4. Suddenly 2 destroyers accelerated directly into each other's projected firing lanes. Confusion spread across enemy sensors instantly. The trap broke apart for less than 6 seconds. But 6 seconds was enough. The Resolute slipped through the gap and vanished into a nearby debris field before the hunters corrected course. Cheers exploded across the bridge. Officers looked at Ethan with open disbelief. One whispered something under his breath. Another stepped back from him entirely. Lyra did neither. She only watched the humans standing beside her tactical display while emergency lights reflected across his tired eyes. That maneuver, she said slowly. Only high command strategists know that pattern. Ethan's face revealed nothing. I used to read a lot. Then every screen on the bridge suddenly flickered black. A new image appeared across all monitors simultaneously. An old military photograph. Human. Younger. Wearing black command armor with silver insignias burned into the shoulders. Beneath the image, one name slowly appeared in white letters. Commander Nathaniel Cross. The bridge crew froze. Ethan closed his eyes like a man too exhausted to keep running. No one spoke after the name appeared on the bridge screens. Commander Nathaniel Cross. Even the younger crew members recognized it immediately. Not because of military history classes. Because legends survived longer than facts. Stories about a human strategist who ended wars before fleets even realized they had lost. Stories about entire armadas surrendering after hearing he had entered a sector. Most officers assumed those stories were exaggerated. Dead myths recycled through old military channels. Yet the man standing beside the maintenance console looked nothing like a legend. His sleeves were rolled halfway up his forearms. Grease stained his hands. Exhaustion sat behind his eyes like permanent weather. Admiral Lyra Vane slowly stepped toward him. Nathaniel Cross died 9 years ago. Ethan gave a faint nod. That was the idea. You lied to my crew. Yes. You boarded my flagship under a false identity. Yes. His honesty irritated her more than excuses would have. Around them, officers exchanged nervous glances while the enemy fleet continued searching the debris field outside. One tactical specialist quietly disabled his console microphone as if afraid the human could somehow hear his heartbeat. Lyra noticed that too. Fear. Real fear. Not of the enemy ships. Of the mechanic standing 10 feet away. Explain, she demanded. Nathaniel rested both hands against the edge of the tactical table. For the first time since she met him, he looked tired enough to collapse. 7 empires built their peace treaties on lies, he said quietly. I found proof. Proof of what? He hesitated. Not dramatic. Not secretive. More like a man deciding whether old wounds were worth reopening. That the war never ended. Silence spread across the bridge again. Outside the viewport, distant destroyers drifted slowly between broken asteroids while search beams swept through the darkness like cold white knives. Lyra crossed her arms tightly. You expect me to believe 7 governments united because of documents? Nathaniel looked at her directly. No, they united because people in power panic. When someone learns where the bodies are buried, one officer muttered under his breath. Another took a nervous step backward. Lyra ignored them all. Then why hide as a mechanic? Nathaniel almost smiled at that. Almost. Because nobody looks twice at the guy fixing the air filters. A strange sound escaped one of the bridge technicians. Half laugh, half disbelief. Nathaniel reached down and quietly picked up his old toolbox from the floor. The motion felt strangely human against all the mythology surrounding his name. I did not come aboard your ship to start problems, Admiral, he said softly. I just needed passage beyond the outer systems. And instead, Lyra replied coldly, you brought an entire coalition fleet to my doorstep. He accepted the accusation without argument. That somehow made it worse. The bridge lights dimmed briefly as the Resolute drifted deeper into the asteroid field. Outside, massive rocks rotated slowly through darkness, scraping faintly against the ship's shields. The atmosphere aboard the bridge changed with every passing minute. Officers who once ignored Ethan Hayes now watched Nathaniel Cross carefully from the corners of their eyes. Not admiration. Not yet. Survival instinct. Like prey spotting a wolf resting beside the fire. Then the communications station crackled again. This time the voice sounded different. Human. Calm. Female. Nathaniel. The transmission said softly. Every person on the bridge froze. Nathaniel closed his eyes for half a second before answering. I was wondering when they would send you. The woman's voice carried faint amusement beneath the static. 7 empires are losing sleep because of you. That must feel flattering. Lyra stepped toward the console. Identify yourself. A pause followed. Then the screen flickered, revealing the image of a pale woman wearing black command armor marked with imperial insignias from 3 different governments at once. Her silver eyes focused directly on Nathaniel. Return quietly, she said. Before this becomes tragic. Nathaniel stared at her image without emotion. You already made it tragic 8 years ago. The woman's expression hardened slightly. Still blaming yourself for Orion. For the first time since his identity was revealed, real emotion crossed Nathaniel's face. Pain. Quick. Controlled. But unmistakable. Lyra saw it immediately. And suddenly she understood something important. The galaxy was not hunting a monster. It was hunting a man who remembered too much. The transmission ended without warning. 1 second the woman's face filled the bridge monitors. The next, only static remained. Admiral Lyra Vane stood motionless beneath the dim tactical lights while the debris field rotated slowly outside the viewport. Nobody aboard the Resolute spoke first. Nathaniel Cross quietly picked up a diagnostic scanner from the maintenance console and checked its cracked display like the conversation had never happened. That disturbed Lyra more than the bounty ever did. Who was she? Lyra finally asked. Nathaniel kept his eyes on the scanner. Someone I used to trust. That narrows it down to half the galaxy. A faint breath escaped him. Not quite a laugh. Fair point. Around the bridge, officers slowly returned to their stations, though every glance still drifted back toward the human mechanic carrying enough political weight to start another interstellar war. The tactical officer cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, the Coalition fleet stopped advancing. Lyra turned toward the holographic display. The enemy ships had repositioned themselves along the outer edge of the asteroid field. Waiting. Watching. They are afraid to enter, Nathaniel said quietly. Why? Asked one of the younger navigators. Nathaniel looked toward the rotating debris outside. Because this field is unstable. So if you understand gravity drift patterns, it becomes a weapon. Silence settled across the bridge again. One senior officer folded his arms tightly. You are talking about turning an asteroid field into a combat zone. Nathaniel shrugged lightly. Everything is a combat zone if somebody desperate enough walks into it. Lyra studied him carefully. The stories had called Nathaniel Cross ruthless, brilliant, dangerous. Yet the man standing before her spoke with the exhaustion of someone who hated every skill he possessed. You said, the war never ended, she said. What happened at Orion? For the first time, Nathaniel did not answer immediately. He stared at the tactical display while cold blue light reflected across his face. Outside the viewport, massive rocks drifted like silent tombstones through darkness. 8 years ago, he said softly, 7 governments signed a peace treaty after Orion Station collapsed. One officer nodded carefully. The station reactor failed during negotiations. Nathaniel looked at him. That is the official version. The room fell silent again. Lyra stepped closer. And the real version? Nathaniel rubbed grease from his fingertips slowly, like a man trying to scrub away old memories. The reactor did not fail. A chill moved through the bridge crew. Someone overloaded it intentionally, he continued. Millions died. Entire sectors blamed each other. The war should have lasted another 20 years after that. But it ended, Lyra said quietly. Nathaniel nodded once. Because the same people responsible for Orion secretly funded peace talks afterward. One officer shook his head in disbelief. That makes no sense. It does if war becomes profitable first. The bridge grew very still. Even the ambient engine hum sounded quieter now. Lyra realized something uncomfortable then. Nathaniel was not speaking like a fugitive trying to justify himself. He sounded like a man carrying evidence nobody wanted exposed. Suddenly the ship trembled hard beneath their feet. Warning alarms flashed crimson again. Incoming gravity surge, shouted Navigation Command. The asteroid field had started collapsing inward. Massive rocks shifted position outside the viewport, dragged by invisible currents twisting through space. The Coalition is moving, another officer yelled. They are forcing us deeper into the gravity well. Nathaniel's expression darkened instantly. No, he said quietly. They are flushing us out. Lyra moved beside him at the tactical display. Can we escape? Nathaniel's eyes tracked the shifting debris patterns at impossible speed. Every movement outside seemed to calculate itself inside his head before sensors even updated. Yes, he said softly. But only if we stop thinking like prey. Lyra stared at him. Meaning? Nathaniel finally looked directly at her. Calm. Focused. Dangerous in a way that felt terrifyingly controlled. Turn the Resolute around, he said. We are going hunting instead. The bridge crew stared at Nathaniel Cross like he had finally lost his mind. Outside the Resolute, the asteroid field twisted deeper into chaos as unstable gravity currents pulled entire chunks of rock into slow collisions. Enemy destroyers circled the outer edge carefully, waiting for the flagship to panic. Admiral Lyra Vane crossed her arms tightly. You want me to charge directly toward the fleet hunting us? Nathaniel nodded once. Right now they think you are afraid. We are outnumbered. Yes. Outgunned. Also yes. Lyra narrowed her golden eyes. You are not helping your argument. For the first time in hours, a faint smile touched Nathaniel's face. Tired. Brief. Human. Fear makes people predictable, he said quietly. Especially governments. He stepped toward the tactical display again, while officers instinctively moved aside to give him room. Nobody questioned it anymore. Not after watching him predict enemy formations before the ship's sensors did. Nathaniel highlighted a cluster of unstable asteroids rotating near the outer edge of the field. Those destroyers are maintaining safe distance because they think the gravity surges are random. And they are not, asked the navigation officer. Nathaniel shook his head slowly. Nothing in space is random if you understand the math. His fingers moved across the holographic map with calm precision. Drift vectors shifted. Rotational paths aligned. Collision estimates updated in real time. Lyra watched him carefully. Not because of the tactical display, because of his expression. Nathaniel looked more alive while solving impossible problems than he ever did fixing engines. Like his mind had spent years trapped in silence and finally remembered how to breathe again. "You have done this before," she said softly. Nathaniel did not look up. "Too many times." One younger officer leaned closer to another and whispered, "That is Orion tactical modeling." Nathaniel heard. "Him anyway." "A simplified version," he replied calmly. The room went silent again. Orion. Even saying the name felt dangerous now. Lyra stepped beside him at the display. "What exactly is your plan?" Nathaniel zoomed the star map inward until a narrow corridor appeared between rotating asteroids. "We cut thrust completely for 30 seconds and drift through this channel." The tactical officer frowned immediately. "That puts us directly in range of the coalition ships." "Exactly. That is suicide." Nathaniel finally looked at him. "No, it is bait." Outside the viewport, one of the enemy destroyers shifted position slightly closer to the field. "Waiting. Hunting." Nathaniel pointed toward it. "Their commander thinks fear makes people retreat." "And?" Lyra asked. "He does not know humans sometimes charge directly into bad ideas." A few nervous laughs escaped across the bridge before fading just as quickly. The atmosphere remained heavy, tight. Like everyone aboard the Resolute understood they were standing beside history without knowing whether it would save them or bury them. Suddenly the lights flickered again. A deep vibration rolled through the ship's hull. "Gravity spike incoming," shouted Navigation Command. Warning alarms screamed across the bridge as nearby asteroids shifted violently through space. One massive rock nearly scraped the Resolute's shields before tumbling past the viewport like a falling mountain. Nathaniel watched the movement carefully. Calculating. Always calculating. Then he spoke quietly. "Now." Lyra did not hesitate. "Execute maneuver." The Resolute cut all engine thrust instantly. The massive flagship drifted silently into darkness while the asteroid field swallowed them whole. No engine glow. No active weapons. Just cold metal floating through rotating debris. Outside, coalition destroyers adjusted formation immediately. Predictable. Nathaniel saw it happening before the tactical screens updated. "There," he said softly, pointing toward the lead destroyer. "That is their command ship." Lyra looked at him carefully. "You sound very certain." Nathaniel's expression darkened slightly. "Because I trained the man commanding it." The bridge fell dead silent. Then the communications channel activated once more. This time the voice sounded familiar. Calm. Human. Dangerous. "Still solving impossible situations, Nathaniel?" The same woman from earlier appeared on the monitor, her silver eyes fixed directly on him. "You taught me that survival is mathematics," she continued softly. "So tell me honestly, did you really think I would not predict this maneuver too?" Nathaniel stared at her image for one long second. Then, for the first time since Admiral Lyra met him, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. The concern in Nathaniel Cross's eyes vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but Admiral Lyra Vane caught it anyway. The woman on the screen smiled faintly from the bridge of the Coalition command ship, her silver eyes reflecting tactical displays filled with rotating asteroids and projected firing lanes. "You always taught us to think 3 moves ahead," she said softly. "Did you really believe I would not learn?" Nathaniel stared at her image without blinking. "You learned too well, Elena." The name settled heavily across the bridge. Not fear this time. Recognition. Crew members were beginning to understand they were watching ghosts from an older war speak to each other like former family members standing on opposite sides of a grave. Elena leaned back in her command chair. Black armor covered her shoulders, marked by insignias from governments that normally refused to share air with one another. "It did not have to become this," she said quietly. "You could have stayed dead." Nathaniel's voice stayed calm. "I tried." Outside the Resolute, the asteroid field shifted again. Massive rocks rotated through darkness while gravity currents bent sensor readings into distorted waves. The Coalition fleet held position near the outer edge, waiting patiently now. That worried Lyra more than aggression would have. Predators became dangerous when they stopped rushing. Elena glanced toward her tactical officers before returning her attention to Nathaniel. "You still have the archive, do not you?" Silence. Nathaniel did not answer. Elena smiled sadly. "That means yes." Lyra stepped forward immediately. What? Archive. Neither of them looked at her. The Orion records, Elena continued softly. Every transaction, every order, every signature tied to the station collapse. One officer near the communications station whispered something under his breath that sounded almost like a prayer. Nathaniel finally spoke. Millions died because powerful people needed fear to stay profitable. Elena nodded once. Yes. And now 7 empires would rather erase one mechanic than admit the truth. Her expression hardened slightly. You are not a mechanic, Nathaniel. That is the problem. The transmission flickered as gravity interference rolled through the sector. For a moment, only static filled the bridge speakers. Then Elena's face returned again. More tired this time. More human. Leave the archive with the Resolute, she said quietly. Disappear again. I can still protect you. Nathaniel almost laughed at that. Protect me. I am trying. By surrounding us with warships? Her eyes lowered briefly. You taught me survival sometimes looks cruel from the outside. The room fell silent once more. Lyra studied Nathaniel carefully. The tension in his face had changed. Not fear anymore. Regret. The kind carried by people who once believed they were building something better. Then the tactical officer suddenly shouted, "New contacts emerging." Every screen on the bridge lit up instantly. 3 additional Coalition cruisers dropped from hyperspace directly above the asteroid field, their massive silhouettes blocking entire sections of starlight. They are sealing the exits, Navigation Command warned. We are trapped. Nathaniel stared at the tactical display for one long second. Calculating again. Always calculating. But this time Lyra noticed something different. Fatigue. Even legends eventually became tired. Elena's voice softened through the speakers. Please, Nathaniel. Do not make me order the next step. Nathaniel looked at her image quietly. You already know how this ends. Elena's expression trembled for the first time. Just slightly. Yes, she whispered. That is what scares me. Suddenly the Resolute shuddered violently. Emergency alarms screamed across every deck as the ship lights flickered dark red. Boarding signatures detected, shouted Security Command. Multiple unauthorized breaches along the lower maintenance corridors. The bridge erupted into chaos instantly. Officers grabbed sidearms. Security teams flooded communication channels. Outside the viewport, Coalition destroyers finally advanced toward the flagship. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly like a man hearing an old song he hated. Then he quietly reached beneath the maintenance console and pulled out a black case nobody had noticed before. Lyra watched him open it slowly. Inside rested a worn combat jacket marked with faded silver insignias and an old sidearm scratched from years of use. The entire bridge fell silent again. Nathaniel lifted the jacket carefully, almost respectfully. Then he looked toward the security alarms flashing across the ship. I was really hoping, he said softly, to stay retired a little longer. The combat jacket looked older than the warships surrounding them. Black fabric faded gray at the edges. Silver insignias scratched nearly smooth with time. Nathaniel Cross lifted it from the case with careful hands, like touching a memory heavy enough to break bones. Around the bridge, nobody spoke. Even the emergency alarms seemed distant now beneath the weight of the moment. Admiral Lyra Vane watched him slide the jacket over his shoulders. It fit perfectly despite the years. That unsettled her more than anything else. Some people wore uniforms. Others became them. Security reports flooded the bridge speakers all at once. Boarding teams moving through lower engineering. Deck 9 security falling back. Multiple Coalition signatures confirmed aboard the ship. Nathaniel calmly fastened the jacket cuffs while officers scrambled around him in panic. Then he picked up the old sidearm from the case. Not flashy, not ceremonial, just worn metal carried by someone who trusted function more than appearance. Lyra stepped toward him. You are seriously going down there alone? Nathaniel checked the weapon's power indicator before answering. If Coalition Marines are boarding this ship, they are not here for your crew. That does not mean I let you. Walk into it by yourself. He finally looked at her directly. Tired eyes. Steady voice. Admiral, your responsibility is keeping this ship alive. And yours? A faint silence followed. Then Nathaniel gave the smallest shrug. I stopped knowing that years ago. The bridge lights flickered again as another tremor rolled through the Resolute. Somewhere below them, Metal groaned beneath pressure changes caused by forced docking clamps attaching to the hull. Nathaniel turned toward the exit corridor without another word. Then Lyra surprised herself. I am coming with you. Half the bridge turned toward her in shock. Admiral, one officer started. You have the bridge, she interrupted coldly. Maintain defensive positioning and keep us inside the debris field. Nathaniel paused near the doorway. That is a bad idea. Probably, Lyra admitted while securing the sidearm at her waist. Humans seem unusually comfortable with those. For the first time since she met him, Nathaniel gave a real smile. Brief. Exhausted. But real. You are learning fast. The lower corridors of the Resolute felt different from the bridge. Narrower. Darker. Emergency lights painted the metal walls deep crimson while steam drifted from damaged vents overhead. Somewhere in the distance, security teams shouted status updates through crackling comm systems. Nathaniel moved through the ship with unsettling familiarity. Not just the layout, the rhythm, the timing. Like he already knew exactly where danger would appear before it happened. Lyra noticed how he glanced toward intersections before turning corners. How his eyes tracked ceiling cameras and maintenance shafts automatically. This was not battlefield aggression. It was survival instinct carved into muscle memory. You trained Elena, Lyra said quietly as they moved through the corridor. Nathaniel nodded once. A long time ago. Did you trust her? Enough to regret it. They reached a sealed blast door near engineering. Beyond it came faint echoes of movement and distorted radio chatter. Nathaniel stopped immediately. Every trace of warmth disappeared from his face. Focus replaced it instead. Cold. Precise. Controlled. He pressed one hand lightly against the metal wall beside the door. Listening. Counting. 6 people, he said softly. Lyra frowned. You can tell that through a sealed blast door? 5 breathing normally, Nathaniel replied. 1 nervous. She stared at him for half a second. That is impossible. Nathaniel looked at her calmly. Most useful skills are. Before she could answer, the corridor lights suddenly cut out completely. Darkness swallowed the ship for 2 full seconds before dim backup lighting activated. Then every screen along the hallway flickered alive simultaneously. Elena's face appeared again across the corridor monitors. Nathaniel, she said softly, please do not make them afraid of you again. Nathaniel stared at the screens without emotion. Too late. Then the blast door behind him slowly began unlocking from the other side. The blast door opened with a deep metallic groan. Cold air spilled into the corridor, carrying the sharp smell of ozone and overheated circuitry. 6 Coalition Marines stood beyond the doorway in matte black armor, weapons lowered but ready. None of them looked surprised to see Nathaniel Cross waiting for them. That unsettled Admiral Lyra veined immediately. These soldiers had not come hunting a monster. They had come expecting a legend. The Marine closest to the door removed his helmet slowly. Human. Mid-40s. Scar beneath one eye. His expression shifted the moment he saw Nathaniel standing there in the old black combat jacket. Commander, he said quietly. Nathaniel gave a tired nod. Marcus. The man's jaw tightened slightly. I was hoping the reports were wrong. They usually are. No one raised a weapon. No one moved at all. The tension in the corridor felt heavier than combat. Like everyone understood the wrong word could wake old ghosts buried beneath years of silence. Marcus glanced toward Lyra briefly before speaking again. They sent us because we served under you once. Nathaniel's face revealed nothing. That was cruel of them. Marcus lowered his eyes for a second. Maybe. But nobody else would have walked through that door without panicking. Elena's voice echoed softly from the wall monitors lining the corridor. Nathaniel, please. It does not have to end here. Nathaniel looked toward the screen. It already ended at Orion. Silence followed. Even the ship seemed quieter now. The distant hum of damaged engines. The faint vibration of unstable gravity currents outside the hull. Lyra watched Nathaniel carefully as he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Every Marine stiffened slightly. Slowly, Nathaniel removed a small black data drive no larger than 2 fingers. The archive, Marcus whispered. Nathaniel looked down at it for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part is? He asked quietly. Nobody answered. His tired eyes lifted toward the Marines standing before him. It was not the corruption. It was not the lies. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. It was how easy it became for good people to look away. Elena's expression flickered on the monitor. Pain crossed her face before discipline buried it again. Nathaniel stepped toward Marcus and placed the data drive into his hand. Every person in the corridor froze. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. You are surrendering it. Nathaniel shook his head slightly. No, he looked directly at Marcus. I am trusting somebody to finally stop hiding it. Marcus stared down at the drive like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nathaniel, if 7 empires are willing to hunt one tired mechanic across the galaxy, Nathaniel said softly, then maybe the truth matters more than survival. The corridor fell silent again. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus slowly removed the insignia patch from his coalition armor and dropped it onto the floor. One by one, the other Marines followed. No speeches, no dramatic declarations, just quiet choices made by exhausted people tired of carrying lies. Lyra felt a strange pressure tighten in her chest watching it happen. Nathaniel looked genuinely surprised for the first time all night. Marcus gave a faint smile. You taught us something once, Commander. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow slightly. Marcus shrugged. Fear makes governments predictable. A soft laugh escaped Nathaniel before he could stop it. Small, human, real. Suddenly the ship lights stabilized for the first time. In hours, outside the viewport at the end of the corridor, the Coalition destroyers began pulling away from the asteroid field one after another. Retreating. Elena's image remained on the monitor, silent now. Her silver eyes rested on Nathaniel for several long seconds. You could disappear again, she said quietly. Nathaniel glanced toward the maintenance corridor behind him. Grease stains still marked his sleeves beneath the combat jacket. Honestly, he replied softly, I was happier fixing engines. Elena smiled sadly. That is probably why they could never become you. Her transmission faded into static. The corridor lights dimmed to their normal glow as silence settled across the Resolute at last. Nathaniel looked down at his old combat jacket for a moment before quietly removing it again. Then he handed the sidearm to Marcus and picked up his worn mechanic toolbox from beside the wall. Admiral Lyra Vane watched him walk back toward engineering without another word. Not like a war hero. Not like a legend feared by 7 empires. Just a tired man returning to work. And somehow, that felt far more important.